Last week we discussed how to access information in a database using data-bound controls. This week we're going to talk about ActiveX data objects. ActiveX data objects, sometimes this is shortened to adoc.net, that allow us to get information from the database. Data-bound controls are pretty much magic, and they're pretty much limited in the scope of things that they can do. In order to really use something in the real world, we need to know about adoc.net. And so we're going to be exploring adoc.net model over the next 2 weeks. This week we're going to just concentrate on these data objects. Now I'm saying that they're data objects. They're really classes, but Microsoft calls them data objects and uses the term objects and classes interchangeably, so I probably will do that as well. So that's one thing to know. And the other thing to know is that even though I put down connection, command, data reader, and parameter, those objects don't exist per se, because all of these objects are provider specific. So there's a Oracle connection object. There's a SQL Server connection object. There's an OLADB connection object that allows you to connect to any database that you want to, although OLADB is a pretty slow way of getting at data. The SQL connection object outperforms the OLADB objects by a factor of about 5 to 1. So if you have a provider-specific one there, you don't want to use OLADB. At any rate, these are the things that we're going to be concentrating on this week, and this is what we're going to be concentrating on in this video, the connection object or the connection class. So the property that we want to know, and there's lots of properties, but the one that we are going to be using in this class is going to be connection string. And then there's going to be the open and close methods that will open the database and close the database. Okay, so let's do some coding. So over here what I've done is I've just designed a simple form, put a list box on it, and now I want to write the code that will go out and get information from the database. Now I've also, just like last week, copied in the registration database, registration.mdf, the SQL Server registration database, and what I've done here is I've copied the output directory, changed it from copy always, which is the default, to copy if newer, just so that I can perpetuate changes and feel like I'm making some progress. So that if I make a change to the database, it actually reflects right away. So the first thing I'm going to do in my code is I'm going to type in a using. And the reason that I'm going to type in a using is so that I don't have to type this over and over again down below. So I want to use system.data.SQL client. Okay, so that way I don't have to type system.data.SQL client whenever I want to use an ActiveX data object. Okay, so the first thing that we use is our connection object, and remember there is no connection object per se, so I'm not going to type down connection, but I am going to type in SQL connection. Then I'm going to give it a name of some sort. Let's say student connection, because that's what I'm going to be reading in. And then I want to instantiate this object. So I'm going to say equals new SQL connection. Okay. And then now I have to, going back over here, I want to initialize the connection string and do open and close. So I need to initialize the connection string, And the connection string tells me what database I want to connect to and how I want to connect to it. And I'm not going to put that in for right now. I'll come back to that in a minute. But I do want to code the open. Remember, it's a method. And then I want to code the close. And remember that it's a method as well. Now, typically, this is what I do. Whenever I code an open, I code a close so I don't forget to do it later. Sometimes people just code the open and code all sorts of other junk, but forget to do the close. I normally, when I open something, I like to close it at the same time. Now, if I were to just run this as is, it comes up and says connection string property has not been initialized, and I knew that. But I just wanted to show you what would happen if I hadn't put in the connection string. So where do I get the connection strings from? Fortunately, there's a website out there called connectionstrings.com, and there's a direct link from our lesson this week into connectionstring.com, or you can just type in connectionstrings.com, and it will show you connection strings for a lot of different databases, as well as Excel spreadsheets. You can treat Excel spreadsheets as a database. But we're going to look at SQL Server, so I'm just going to click on SQL Server. And there's many ways in which I connect up with SQL Server. So if I had set up a real SQL Server application instead of just use the SQL Server that sort of comes with Visual Studio, I would use one of these up here. But what I want to do is I've used the one that we set up last week, which is the one that comes with SQL Server. The automatic one that comes with is local DB. So I want to use this connection string. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that connection string, and I'm going to paste the connection string in here. Okay, now I'm going to get it so that it's all on one line, and then so that we can see it and talk about it a little bit. Okay, so the first thing that we see is this. There's a couple things. One is this says it's an unrecognizable escape sequence, and just inside of C#, inside of C# constants, whenever you put in a backslash, it feels like the next character is supposed to be a control of some sort. If you want to get an actual backslash, you have to put in backslash backslash. So you have to have two backslashes to get you one backslash. That's just because of the way that C# interprets its strings. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, obviously, it's not going to be my data here. It's going to be registration. And the other thing is that this says that this is an absolute reference, and typically we don't want absolute references, because if it goes from one computer to another computer, unless I put things in the exact same place, it's going to blow up on me, right? So instead, I use a pipe symbol, and a pipe symbol is just is just a backslash shift. So and I'm going to put in something called data directory. Okay, so this will say relative to what I'm using, this is where I get my information from. Okay, so I will then start the program, and it goes out and connects things, and absolutely nothing happens. Well, absolutely nothing happens means everything is great, because suppose, for example, I had misspelled registration or something like that. I would get a bug that it couldn't find what I was looking for. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's just show that one more time. I think I got rid of that a little bit fast. So it said it attempted to put it, and I look over there and I see, oh, I misspelled registration. So now I need to go over here and spell registration correctly. Okay, so when I use it, everything is just fine. So here we saw how to use a connection object, and subsequent videos will show us how to use other commands in SQL Server as well. But I just wanted to point out one thing here, and that was this, that this connects to my local database, but I just have to change this one line if I want to connect to a different database.